My sister-in-law is more important than my wife. A wedding is supposed to be an irreplaceable event for a couple. At the moment of the cake cutting, which is often called the first joint effort, Richard pushed me aside and called Lisa. "Here, hold the knife." "What, really, thanks." The cake cutting that Richard and I were supposed to do together. Instead, right in front of me, Richard and Lisa were happily engaged in the task. I know Richard dotes on Lisa. But doesn't he understand there are things that are acceptable and things that aren't? I've endured it until now, but I've reached my limit. I don't care if I'm seen as selfish. The wedding is off. I demanded the cancellation of the wedding. My name is Lisa Smith. I'm 27 years old. Singer. Living at home while working at a design company. I am grateful for the peaceful life I lead, helped by my kind parents and colleagues. I once had a husband. His name was Richard Wilson. Richard and I met when we were in high school. I started my new life without any friends. What if I didn't make any friends for the next 3 years? These thoughts kept swirling in my mind, and there were nights before the entrance ceremony when I couldn't sleep. The day of the entrance ceremony, I headed to high school with determination. I was nervous until I got there, but for some reason, when I entered the classroom and took my seat, the nerves vanished. I took a deep breath and looked around the classroom. Maybe, just maybe, I could make it here. This thought lightened my mood even more. After the entrance ceremony, I returned home, thinking about my upcoming high school life. What club should I join? Which elective classes should I choose? There were many events unique to the new school year, and I couldn't wait. A month passed. I made friends and joined a club. It seemed like I could keep up with my studies too. One ordinary day, I became friends with a boy. That boy was Richard. Richard and I were in the same class and club, so we knew each other, but just barely. We had never talked. But one day, we ended up alone together by chance. I was waiting for my mom to pick me up at the school gate when I saw Richard there. No one else was around, and I could hear the sound of the trees swaying in the wind. Feeling a bit awkward, I reached for my phone. "What's the first period tomorrow?" Richard's voice reached my ears. "What was it?" "Math." "That's the one, thanks." I was surprised Richard talked to me, but I didn't feel bad about it at all. In fact, I wondered if this could be an opportunity to become friends with him. "Are you good at math?" "I'm not great at math. Actually, I'm not very good at studying in general." Really, that's surprising. Even though I knew nothing about Richard, I somehow found it surprising and blurted it out. "Surprising. Sorry, I just thought you seemed like someone who was good at studying." "What, you think I look like someone who studies? Well, you look like someone who studies too." "Really?" Richard laughed at my words. For some reason, that fact made me happy. This conversation brought Richard and me closer. We started talking in class and going to club activities together. Since Richard wasn't good at studying, I often helped him during breaks or after school. Richard was worse at studying than I had imagined. But if I taught him step by step, he understood. Because of that, it was rewarding to teach him, and I began to enjoy studying with him. Because of this, our classmates and club members often teased us. Richard denied it, but his face seemed to turn a little red, looking embarrassed. Strangely, I didn't feel bad about it either. A year passed, and we became sophomores. As the new semester began, and things settled down with both studies and club activities, Richard confessed to me. "I've always liked you." Hearing Richard's words made me happy. At the same time, I realized again that I indeed liked Richard. "I liked you too. Let's be together." Hearing my response, Richard seemed relieved. He leaned back in his chair and murmured, "I'm glad." And so we started dating. What kind of scenery will we see together in the future? I hope we can stay together forever without thinking about when it might end. These thoughts drifted through my mind. After we started dating, Richard and I naturally became much closer. We talked in the classroom, went to club activities together, and even walked to and from school together. On weekends, we went on dates and began visiting each other's homes. Richard's house is a luxurious mansion. Since it was my boyfriend's house, I always felt nervous no matter how many times I visited. "You don't have to be so nervous," Richard would laugh. About 6 months after Richard and I started dating, we had just finished our usual date and were at Richard's house. There was a girl in the living room that I didn't recognize, but I quickly realized who she was. His sister. I had heard from Richard that he had a sister. However, this was the first time I met her. "Patricia, aren't you hanging out with your friends today?" "Big brother, no, they're all busy." The girl, called Patricia, looked delighted and hugged Richard tightly. He hugged her back and smiled. It was heartwarming to see how close they were. Then she glanced at me. "Who is this? Is she your girlfriend?" "Girlfriend? Well, this is Lisa." He must have been embarrassed to say I was his girlfriend again. Richard blushed as he introduced me. Hearing my name, Patricia looked as happy as when she hugged Richard and began to introduce herself. "I'm Patricia, his sister. Nice to meet you." "Patricia, nice to meet you too. I'm glad we finally met." While Patricia and I talked, Richard watched us with kind eyes. After that, Richard and I went to his room. "Your sister is so cute." "Isn't she? Patricia is really cute and hardworking. She's my pride and joy." He leaned forward, eagerly talking about Patricia. "Patricia is 3 grades below us. She's cute, hardworking, and unlike me, good at studying. She usually spends her after-school time and weekends at club activities or with friends, so she's often not home when I visit Richard. Richard and Patricia are really close." That's the impression I got from listening to his enthusiastic talk. "You two are really close, aren't you?" "Yeah, we are." At that time, I didn't feel any discomfort about the closeness between Richard and Patricia. I just thought they were an adorably close brother and sister. However, something happened that made me feel a little uneasy. It was about a month after the first time I met Patricia. I was fiddling with my phone in Richard's room when there was a knock on the door. "Come in," Richard said. Patricia entered, carrying a tray. I brought some juice and snacks. She placed glasses of apple juice in front of us and sat down. "Thank you." "You're welcome. Drink a lot." That day we first met. As I was about to leave, I got a chance to talk to Patricia, and we quickly became closer. We decided to stop using formal language and titles with each other and talk like friends. Patricia is very friendly and easy to talk to. Just as I enjoyed talking to Patricia, I hoped she felt the same about talking to me. Well, the 3 of us chatted about random things. An hour passed before we knew it. It wasn't just me who noticed. "Wow, is it that late already?" "Yeah, we talked more than I realized." Richard and Patricia looked at each other and laughed. The next moment, Richard pulled Patricia into his arms. I knew they were close and often showed physical affection. But this time, I was surprised. Their physical affection didn't seem like that of just siblings. It looked like something between lovers. "Patricia." "Stop it. It tickles." Richard buried his face in Patricia's neck. Patricia said it tickled and asked him to stop, but her tone didn't sound like she was bothered at all. In fact, she seemed happy. I couldn't help but ask, "You guys are really close?" After asking, I regretted it a little, thinking I might have pried too much. but neither of them seemed annoyed. If anything, they looked pleased that I noticed their closeness. As I saw this, I couldn't help but feel uneasy about how close they were. However, being an only child, I didn't understand the typical sibling dynamics. All I could do was quietly watch their continued displays of affection. Even after that, the closeness between Richard and Patricia didn't change. I began to see them showing physical affection more often. As time passed, Richard and I were getting ready to start college. Although we hadn't planned it, we ended up going to the same university, though we were in different departments. We both started living alone, so we spent even more time together. On weekends, we went out on dates, but mostly we stayed at each other's places, doing assignments or watching movies. Since starting college, I hadn't seen Patricia. Have you seen Patricia recently? Is she doing well? Sometimes I would bring up Patricia in conversation, because I genuinely wondered how she was doing. Whenever I did, Richard would always talk about her with joy. Patricia, has gotten even cuter lately. I mean, she was always cute, but now she's like super cute. Oh, here. This is a recent pic of Patricia. Isn't she adorable? Richard would take out his phone and show me photos of Patricia. She's cute, right? And then, when I commented on her cuteness, Richard would show me more photos from his gallery. Indeed, Patricia was cute. However, something kept bothering me. The way Richard treated Patricia and me was noticeably different. I knew Richard adored Patricia and that he used affectionate words for her. But he was relatively dry towards me, his girlfriend. He never praised me or called me cute like he did to Patricia. I understood that a girlfriend and a sister are different, and Richard felt differently about each of us. Still, I couldn't help but think he could praise me a little more. Honestly, I couldn't deny feeling jealous. I questioned Richard and Patricia's relationship to that extent. Of course, I couldn't voice my thoughts to Richard, so I quietly listened to him. About 6 months after we started college, I visited Richard's house as usual. Hello, oh, these shoes. Patricia's here today. What? Patricia is. Patricia had never been home when I visited before. Feeling puzzled, I followed Richard to the living room, where Patricia was lying on the sofa, fiddling with her phone. There was a branded bag that seemed quite high-end for her age. Around her neck and ears were accessories with brown logos that also seemed too mature for her age. Lisa, long time no see. Hi, long time no see. Didn't he tell you I was coming? I wanted to make it a surprise. I figured you'd be thrilled to see Patricia and be surprised if you didn't know she was here. Richard looked proud as he explained, and Patricia seemed happy. Really, Lisa? Yeah, I was surprised but happy. Great. Patricia got up to talk to me but soon sank back into the sofa. Usually, Richard would sit next to me, but this time he sat next to Patricia. I found a spot on the carpet and sat down. It's been a while, hasn't it? Yeah, it has. About 2 weeks, right? If 2 weeks feels like a long time, how often do they usually see each other? I wondered as I watched them hold hands and act affectionately like a couple. Even after that, they stayed in their own world and ignored me. I felt left out with no chance to join in. We had planned to watch a movie together today, but it seemed impossible now. I decided not to disturb them and quietly started working on my college assignments. Before I knew it, 2 hours had passed since I arrived. I was almost done with my assignments. They were still in their own world, talking and being affectionate. You two are really close, aren't you? I said, trying to sound sarcastic. But my sarcasm didn't register. Yeah, we are. We're really close. Their excitement grew as they looked at each other. I regretted saying anything, but I realized I had to express my feelings clearly. A few days later, I decided to talk to Richard during our time alone. I want to talk about Patricia. About Patricia? What is it? Do you want to see her again? If so. No, I think it's great that you two are close, but maybe you could spend a little more time with me too. Richard looked surprised, his eyes widening. But then he laughed as usual and spoke. What? Are you jealous? It's not really jealousy. Patricia and I are just siblings. We're not doing anything weird. Don't worry about it. Richard didn't seem to take my words seriously and laughed it off. Even after that, Richard and Patricia's excessive interactions didn't stop. It became normal for Patricia to be around when Richard and I were together. Despite my presence, they kept entering their own world and continued their physical affection. It's great that you're close with Patricia, but could you do it when I'm not around? Even when I said that, Richard didn't listen at all. Come on. Is it really that big of a deal? Like I said before, Patricia and I are just siblings. We act like that because we are close. You're making a big deal out of nothing. Richard laughed, not taking my words seriously at all. Honestly, there were times when I wanted to break up with him, but I never acted on it. The main reason was that I didn't have the energy to start a new relationship from scratch. If I had broken up with him when I first felt something was off, things wouldn't have gotten so bad. Looking back now, I felt frustrated with my past self. We graduated from college and became working adults. I had many thoughts about Richard, but I still loved him. And since we started working, it seemed like his interactions with Patricia had decreased. Maybe he realized I was genuinely upset, or maybe he was just busy with work. I didn't know his true feelings, but I chose to interpret it in a way that suited me. I began to think he finally understood how I felt. 5 years into our careers, Richard proposed to me. I will make you happy, I promise. Richard expressed his feelings with a serious face. Looking back now, my actions seemed strange. But at that moment, I still loved Richard. Yes, I look forward to being with you. I accepted Richard's proposal. We decided to build a happy life together. After that, we got married. We rented a small apartment and started our new life together. However, this was when Richard resumed his interactions with Patricia. More and more often, I came home to find Patricia there. What was supposed to be our life together turned into more time spent with the three of us. Lisa, what's for dinner tonight? Wait, you're staying for dinner again? Of course, I've been eating here every day lately. Patricia said it as if it was the most natural thing in the world, sitting at our table. Honestly, I didn't feel good about it. Naturally, I couldn't ask Patricia directly to stop coming over, so I talked to Richard. But his answer was always the same. Just until the wedding is over, please bear with it until then. Apparently, Richard wanted me to tolerate his interactions with Patricia until the wedding. That was fine, but given everything that had happened, I couldn't fully trust it. In reality, Richard's behavior with Patricia was outrageous. He would cancel our dates to go out with Patricia without hesitation. He spoiled her with branded accessories and cosmetics. Patricia didn't seem to mind at all. But I told myself this would all end after the wedding. Even though I couldn't fully believe it, I still wanted to trust him. However, one day, something happened that pushed me beyond my limits. It happened during our wedding. After many meetings, we had planned a wedding that we both were happy with. I was really looking forward to it. Richard seemed just as excited about the wedding as I was. Despite everything, I believed Richard loved me. That's why we were together. Thinking that filled my heart with joy. The ceremony went smoothly, and the reception began. The reception progressed under the guidance of the MC, and it was time for the cake cutting. The staff handed us the knife, and we started walking towards the cake. But then, Richard pushed me aside and called Patricia. "Here, hold the knife." "Really, thanks." Patricia, who was initially surprised when called, quickly understood and ran over the cake cutting that Richard and I were supposed to do together. Instead, Richard and Patricia were in front of me, happily engaged in the task. "Wait a minute." I was confused. I tried to say something, but Richard laughed and said something shocking. "My sister comes before my wife." I knew Richard adored Patricia. But didn't he understand there are things you can and can't do? Hearing those words, something inside me broke. I had endured it until now, but this was the last straw. I didn't care if I seemed selfish anymore. "The wedding is off." I demanded to cancel the wedding. "What?" There were voices of confusion, but I didn't care. I asked the venue staff to arrange for the guests to leave immediately. As the guests departed, I looked each one in the face and apologized. I felt incredibly sorry for the people who took the time to attend. Before I knew it, my relatives, except for Richard and Patricia, were standing beside me and apologizing. When all the guests had left, only a few relatives and staff remained in the venue. The atmosphere was tense, with some people looking confused and others looking angry. My father was the first to break the silence. "What was that? Hey, you, what were you thinking?" "Well, don't like that. Why did you call your sister up there? Don't you understand how inappropriate that was? Can't you imagine how Lisa felt watching that?" "That's right, sure, the wedding is for Richard and Lisa, but there are things you can and can't do. It's just unacceptable." Richard was silent as my parents berated him. Beside him, Patricia looked down, clearly uncomfortable. Then my Mill spoke up. "Don't just stand there. Say something. You ruined the wedding, and now you're silent. Do you not realize how wrong your actions were?" "I'm sorry." "We're sorry." Richard and Patricia reluctantly apologized, but they didn't seem genuinely remorseful. Patricia, in particular, looked as if she wanted to say she did nothing wrong. "What exactly are you apologizing for? Be clear about it." "Sorry." Normally, I avoid raising my voice, but seeing me visibly angry seemed to confuse them. But my anger wouldn't subside. I've endured too much already. This much should be allowed. "Come on, speak up. Don't you understand?" "I'm sorry for calling Patricia up there." "Up there? Where exactly? Be specific." "At the cake cutting." Richard answered my questions in a mumble, looking down. Although they apologized, I had no intention of forgiving them. "Patricia, don't you have something to say? Why did you go up there?" "Well, I was called, but am I really at fault? Even though Richard called you, you still went up there. Don't you get it?" Patricia fell silent at her father's words. She sulked, so it was pointless to wait for her to say more. "Didn't you realize that doing something like this at a wedding is the worst? I knew you two were close, but I didn't think you'd do something like this at our wedding. I just thought it would be the last chance to make my sister happy." "What? So you did that? Isn't that incredibly selfish? Marrying you was a mistake. Let's get a divorce." Marrying Richard was a mistake. That was my honest feeling. I decided to prepare to leave, realizing that talking to Richard wouldn't get us anywhere. Some were shocked by the word divorce, but no one stopped me. They must have understood after seeing Richard's actions. I apologized to the staff and everyone involved, then went to the waiting room. I packed my things and went back to my parents' house in the car driven by my father. I couldn't stay married to Richard any longer. Seeing his actions, I realized this was the end. While packing my things at home, and even after arriving at my parents' house, Richard followed me, begging for getting back together. I doubted anyone at the venue had urged him to come after me. He must have ignored his relatives' attempts to stop him. and come here forcefully. Please, don't say divorce. We just got married. Please reconsider. I can't reconsider. It's over. But this is so sudden. Sudden. Do you not remember all the times I asked you to stop? It was always about Patricia. I really don't understand you. Richard mumbled as if he still had more to say. But I wasn't about to wait for his words. Just go. I'll contact you about what happens next. Wait. If you come here again without permission, I'll call the police. Got it. Now leave. I forced Richard out and closed the door. What do I need to do from here? I began to feel overwhelmingly tired, and the more I thought about it, the more my head hurt. However, I wasn't alone. I had my parents. Feeling it was okay to rely on them at times like this, I began to unpack. 2 weeks later, I called Richard and Patricia to my parents' house. Richard looked smaller than the last time I saw him. However, in contrast, Patricia was still sulking. I'm really sorry. As soon as he entered the living room, Richard apologized to me and my parents. He seemed remorseful, but I couldn't tell if it was genuine. Apologizing is good, but I'm not forgiving you. Sit down over there. Okay. I motioned for them to sit, and they reluctantly sat on the sofa. I told you before, I want a divorce. I won't ask for any money from you, but you will pay for the wedding cancellation fees. What? Why? Hearing Richard's words, I realized he wasn't truly remorseful. Why do I really need to explain it from the beginning? Well, you were the one who said to cancel the wedding. Do you not understand that you were the cause of it? If you hadn't done something so ridiculous, none of this would have happened. I've told you this before. If you truly understood, you would have agreed to pay the cancellation fees without any argument. I get that, but still. It seemed Richard never even considered the possibility of paying the fees himself. He probably thought I would cover all the costs. But what? If you can make excuses in this situation, that's quite something. Okay, I was wrong, but paying all the cancellation fees by myself, even if I started it, shouldn't we split it? Can you really say that after admitting you were wrong? If I had done something similar to you, what would you say? You'd probably tell me to pay all the fees. I've asked you multiple times to reconsider your relationship with Patricia. This situation is the result of your actions, isn't it? I was furious at Richard's thinking and pressed him hard. If I didn't do this, Richard would never change his mind. It's not about the money. If you're truly sorry, you should be willing to pay this much. It's a matter of principle. If you think I'm being greedy, it shows you're not really sorry. At that moment, my father, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Richard, I hear you've been buying your sister expensive bags and accessories. Why can you spend money on her, but not on Lisa? If you say that's different, it sounds a bit too convenient to me. If you like Patricia so much, you should have married her. No matter how many times I said I wanted time alone with you, you never listened. You always said it was because she was your sister and neglected me. Things got better for a while, but as soon as we got married, it went back to how it was. You told me to bear with it until the wedding was over and even cancelled our plans to go out. And now, you're fine with the divorce, but don't want to pay the cancellation fees. He was okay with not being my husband anymore, but refused to pay the cancellation fees, which was just frustrating. However, whether it was because he finally understood or just wanted to end the conversation, Richard slumped and spoke. All right, I'm sorry. I'll pay, and I'll sign the divorce papers. It took all this for you to finally get it. Fine, sign the divorce papers regarding the cancellation fees. Since money is involved, I prepared some documents. Sign these too. Reluctantly, Richard signed the divorce papers and the documents for the cancellation fees. Meanwhile, Patricia sat there, sulking and fiddling with her nails. Honestly, there wasn't a specific reason I called Patricia here. But since she was involved in the incident, I hope to hear something from her. Patricia, don't you have anything to say? What? You want me to apologize? I don't get it. That's not what I mean. The look on her face was not the cute, innocent one I knew. And besides, the next moment, Patricia revealed something unexpected. This is so annoying, getting dragged into this. Just so you know, I don't even like Richard. What? Patricia, who had always clung to Richard, actually disliked him. Everyone in the room was shocked. But the most shocked was Richard. What? I mean, it's just creepy. It was fine when we were little, but it got really weird when we were in high school. Then why were you always acting like that? In response to Richard's question, Patricia said something even more astonishing. Because he gives me money. What? I mean, if I pretended to be a good, affectionate sister, he would buy me anything. Even when I asked for something I thought he couldn't possibly afford, he just bought it, and I was like, what? Does he really like me that much? Patricia seemed to have a lot to say about Richard. She continued to voice her grievances without stopping. I hated everything you did. Asking me to go out alone with you, always clinging to me, all of it. It was annoying and creepy. Consider your age. Plus, you have a wife now, but you haven't changed a bit. Oh, you had a wife, but now it's more accurate to say you did have one since you're getting divorced. Then why were you always so close to me? I told you, because you'd buy me anything. Did you seriously think I liked you? Even at the cake cutting, you were trying to make me happy, but it was honestly a huge nuisance. Now I'm getting blamed too. Don't drag me into your self-satisfaction. I no longer wanted an apology from Patricia. Her words were too shocking. Are you serious? Do you think I'm lying at this point? It's time to face reality. Patricia's laughter echoed through the house. Looking at Richard's face, I saw despair written all over it. The shock created an indescribable atmosphere, and no one could speak. But then, my mother broke the silence. Maybe you disliked Richard, but did he ever force you to do anything? What? What do you mean? I understand that you were sweet to Richard for money. But you need to know your place. Even at the wedding, you could have chosen not to go up there when Richard called you. Instead, you prioritized your own desires. Richard was the most out of line, but you were also very inappropriate. Patricia's face twisted with frustration. What? Are you lecturing me? Yes. Is there a problem? Do you have any idea how angry I am that my daughter's wedding was ruined, and you're acting like you did nothing wrong? You clearly don't understand. What the hell, this old hag? I've been listening to you. Provoked by my mother's words, Patricia snapped. My mother didn't back down and argued back. Patricia's reaction could be seen as completely unreasonable. After what she did, claiming she wasn't at fault was too much. Then Richard spoke up. Patricia, stop it already. What? I was wrong. No, we were wrong. We? Why me too? He probably didn't want to lecture her. But after hearing Patricia's words, he realized he couldn't keep spoiling her. Lisa, is it okay if Patricia and I pay the cancellation fees together? What? I'm not trying to lessen my burden. If you want, I'll pay the whole amount. But as your mother said, the wedding incident was entirely mine and Patricia's fault. We need to take responsibility. Don't decide that on your own. Richard stopped Patricia as she started to protest. He didn't have the look of a brother who adored his sister. Patricia, it's time to grow up. I know I'm not the best person to say that. If Lisa and her parents are okay with it, I'd like us to pay together. Listening to Patricia made me realize I've spoiled her too much. It's sad it took this much for you to see reality. I'm really sorry. All right, that's fine with me. Patricia's face twisted with anger. This is the worst. I'm not paying. How long are you going to keep saying that? I'll tell Dad everything that happened today, including your attitude and how you talk back to Lisa's mom. The decision is final, so you better accept it. Seriously, what is this? Patricia continued to throw a tantrum until the very end. But as the conversation drew to a close, she seemed to realize that no amount of protesting would get her what she wanted, and finally quieted down. After that, Richard and I successfully finalized our divorce. As discussed, Richard and Patricia covered the wedding cancellation fees. Richard later told me that Patricia had stopped contacting him after our discussion. In the end, Richard lost his wife, money, and the sister he adored, bringing this incident to a close. Feeling abandoned by Patricia, Richard started sending me more emails after the divorce, ranging from updates on his life to pleas for reconciliation. However, no amount of begging could change my feelings at this point. When I continued to ignore him, he eventually gave up. The emails from Richard stopped coming. Now, a year has passed since then. I'm living with my parents and focusing on my work. Despite everything that happened, the employees I invited to the wedding haven't changed their attitude towards me, and I'm truly grateful for that. I want to forget such a disastrous event, but the truth is, it was so shocking that I'll never be able to forget it. Honestly, I regret not being more cautious and thinking more optimistically. But what's done is done. All I can do now is keep moving forward. Today, as always, I'm living my life with the help of those around me. I want to cherish this environment and live a life without regrets in the future.